Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 13 of the Youth Move Colorado podcast. Today, we interview the executive director of Youth Move National, Tay.
The material and information presented here is provided by lived experience youth and for general information purposes only. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are of the guests of our podcast own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Youth Move.
I'm Julia. I use she, her pronouns. And we have a really special guest today. Hi, Tay.
Hey, Julia, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me on. So hello everyone. My name is Arc Telos Saint Amour, which can be a very long name. So most folks call me Tay, which is my nickname. My mandatory pronouns are they, them, their, and I'm the executive director of Youth Move National. And yeah, I'm super excited to talk with you today. And again, thanks for having me on.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining us. Hey, Lizzie. Hey, Soraya.
Hey, I'm Lizzie. My pronouns are she, her. And it's awesome to meet you as well. And yeah,
My name is Raya. I go by the pronouns she, her, hers. So what are we doing today, Julia?
Thank you for asking. So, as Tay said, they're from Youth Move National. And I feel like it's such a huge organization now that is so far reaching. We sometimes forget that we're part of this larger network. So, Tay, what does your role look like with Youth Move National? And could you share a little bit about your background, what brought you to this work?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's a lot within that. So let me
Right.
see what I can tackle. So like I said, my role is as executive director, and really the way that I view that is working very closely with our board of directors to ensure sort of like our mission, our vision, our values are sort of carried out and perpetuated throughout our life as an organization and into the future. So really making sure that we're aligned with those things and driving the organization forward. So that's sort of like the board facing work that I do. And then the staff or organization facing work I do is really trying to, the way I view it is take care of our chapter network, take care of our staff that we have on as our national team, and always be looking at how can we bake in, more capacity, more sustainability, more sort of systemic self-care for everybody. How can we sort of diversify our funds as an organization? How can we beef up our benefits? So really trying to look at our organization, as a part of the system itself, right? We're here to talk about systems, and our nonprofit is really no different. It's a system, and I guess really trying to both maintain it to function as it's supposed to, but also, I mean, I think try to get it to function in a way that isn't like other systems that we're used to. Maybe trying to have that sort of anti-capitalist lens, trying to have sort of an anti-settler colonialism lens, and really trying to do system work differently than what we see a lot of systems, especially in sort of the field in which we're in, which is largely, of course, youth serving systems, which is anywhere from sort of the mental and behavioral health field, juvenile justice, criminal legal system, child welfare system, all the sort of systems that we know are out there doing real harm, so we're trying to hopefully do something different. And I know being youth led and youth driven is really, really important to see in that vision. I'd say probably 70% of our staff is youth, about 80% of our board, including my boss and our entire executive committee, are youth. And so really just making sure, again, that that's like baked into everything we do. So that's a little bit, at least as far as I see it, I statements about Youth Move National and sort of the work that I do day to day within that. I would say my background, oh my gosh, it is complicated. I'm not quite sure how long this is, but we could talk for several days nonstop, and it would be a lot. But maybe let me just pause there and see if you have any questions about the org.
You mentioned a couple of great terms that I wanted to flag and kind of maybe have you talk a little bit more about what those mean to you.
Yeah.
Use of systemic self-care. Can you talk a little bit about what that means for us and for listeners who don't know?
Oh my gosh. Yes. I would love to. I'm genuinely getting excited because talking about, I would say, resilience, hope, positivity, and self-care, and all of those sort of things that surround those topics are one of my favorite topics to talk about, but not possibly from the angle that most people would think, because I'm actually not supportive of any of those ideas. So what I see around, again, self-care, resiliency, hope, positivity, is that those are buzzwords that like I run into a lot within any sort of conference I go to or meetings or in the field. And it all seems to be coming from sort of the systems downward, right? So it tends to be systems saying, gosh, you got to make sure that you're self caring, or gosh, we're so proud of you. You're so resilient. Or like, oh, just got to make sure you maintain hope and positivity. And really what I see is that really becoming very toxic. And how I view it is really burden shifting, right? It's the system continuously doing harm, continuously working as, from my point of view, as intended, which is really to prop up certain identities and communities and ultimately devalue or oppress other communities. And it's a way of sort of shifting that burden to say it's not really on us to change. It's not really on us to do something different. It's not really on us to stop doing the harm, right? It's really on you and how you manage the harm that we do, right? So when they use that term resilience, it's like a way of like exceptionalizing folks, right? To say, gosh, look at all the amazing things you're doing in spite of all the harm that we do to you. Isn't that fantastic? And I run into a lot of youth, they're like, yeah, great, but I'd love for you to stop doing the harm. Oh, no, no, no. You're just so resilient. It's a gift. It's a gift. You learn from it. You're so much stronger. And so again, resiliency is good. I'm not against resiliency, but I really just largely see that as burden shifting. And the same thing with self-care, and I think that that's really where capitalism really sort of comes into play, right? I find self-care is oftentimes used as an excuse really just to exploit more labor, right? It tends to be, hey, we expect you to show up, work a 12-hour day, be flawless at what you do, be perfect, be on, take care of other people. But the moment you clock out, go take a bubble bath, go eat a good meal that you like, grab a pint of ice cream, self care on your own time so that you can clock in the next day and do that 12-hour day and be on again. And so when I'm talking about systemic self-care or sort of systemic resiliency, again, I'm looking at it as far as like, even though we are a nonprofit, even though I am passionate deeply about what Youth Move National does, I have to recognize us as a system. We're also a part of that system. So trying to bake in those terms systemically, right? So instead of it being black out and take that bubble bath, it's like, hey, guess what? Like, we're going to give you extra PTO time, paid time off, or we're going to pay you to do volunteerism, or we're actually going to pay you to self care, right? I'm going to give you $100 to go get some lunch and to take care of yourself. So, what are the ways that the system itself can both not harm and do harm reduction, but then also try to see that self-care itself and to bake in that resiliency so it's not this handing down of a burden, right, that shifts the blame onto that individual, right? Like, gosh, it seems like you're really approaching burnout. You probably should have cared more. God, it really sounds like this is kind of your own problem. When like, no, it's not. Actually, the problem is that it's not baked in systemically. So those are the things that we're trying to do sort of broadly as an organization and really sort of discover what that looks like. So I know that was a long ramble and a tangent. I don't know if any of that makes sense.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. I love that so much. Soraya, Lizzie, do you have any thoughts on that? I'm reminded of we were just recently talking about how youth voices and especially the voices of people of color are like really
Yeah.
tokenized in work like this. But a lot of the time we're sitting on these youth advisory boards and we're sharing our opinions and then, okay, thank you so much. And suddenly the work isn't ours anymore, but they get to stamp youth approved on a lot of work. So I'm
Oh my
reminded of
gosh.
that a little bit.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. A thousand percent. I have a prime example, and I won't name names, so I will keep it very broad and vague. But I was at a conference that was, it was like 2 or 3 days long. And one of the first keynotes that we did on the first day was a youth advisory panel, right? So we got a bunch of youth up on stage in front of hundreds of people. It was live streamed, and we talked about systemic harm. And so we had it was predominantly youth who were queer, trans, and people of color. And so really talking about the most marginalized of the marginalized who our society continuously sort of excludes and forces to the margins. And gosh, they like pulled no punches. Like they were just 1,000% about systemic oppression and naming racism and ableism and naming, transphobia and cis sexism and heterosexism and really calling this room full of system partners out on kind of like the BS and the harm they do. And it was amazing. It was phenomenal. People were like clapping and people were standing up, like just like applauding this panel of youth for like speaking truth to power. And I was like, yes, oh my gosh, these folks get it. Yay, yay, yay. And then the next 2 days, when the youth weren't on the stage, and anytime we talked about justice work or equity work, or diversity work or inclusion work, or about the actions, right? The action it actually takes for you to stop doing that harm or to do harm reduction models, people were literally walking out of the room and they were like complaining, like, oh, this is too heavy. Oh gosh, like we really can't be expected to do this type of work. And so again, to your face, when youth are on the stage saying, hey, this is what you're doing to us, you're harming us, so many folks from the systems can get up there and again clap, give them standing ovations, say, oh yes, oh gosh, thank you so much. But it's all very voyeuristic. It's all very tokenizing. And it's all this like, yeah, we're gonna clap and applaud to your face, right? So you can, like you said, we can stamp that sort of like youth approved. Hey, we invited a youth panel to a conference and we listened to them. We did the thing, check the box, right? But anytime they were forced with actually doing the work to change, we found out rather quickly that it was all sort of like performative justice. It was all very much so virtue signaling. It was just this way to like applaud folks almost like they were behind a shield of glass, right? That we were looking at on a zoo. Like, look at these youth out there. Oh gosh, let's clap for them. Aren't they cute? Oh, look, they're performing tricks. Okay, cool. But now we go and we keep doing the same thing that we're doing, and we don't challenge ourselves to do something different or to act on it. So, Julia, to your point, I have seen that over and over again. That voyeuristic attitude, that tokenizing attitude, and that way to approach this work just from a lens that is so performative and just like really toxic in the ways that it comes out. Yeah, so we're hoping, like I said, to be a different organization, a different system, trying not to do that. So yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but I just want to say I'm in agreement. I am with you on this.
Absolutely. Unless anyone has anything to add, if we can pivot to another phrase that you said, anti-colonialism, and you mentioned wanting Youth Move National to view things through the lens of anti-colonialism. Can you talk a little bit about what that means?
I can, but I see Shariah, I think your hand was up. Okay.
So I could say that I really appreciate the fact that you are using your white privilege for a better reason, because a lot of the times with these types of companies and things of that sort, they don't use their white privilege in the way that it should be, because it's one of those things where they're just like, oh, systematic racism, we're going to look this way. We know it's there, but they're going to look away from the situation. And I'm the type of person where I'm like, hey, we're going to pay attention to this and we're not going to sit here and be neglectful, you know? And when it comes to like certain things of that sort, when it comes to talking about this, it's like, we're not going to ignore this. You know, this is not a thing where you guys could just be like, oh, it's for all youth, except for, you know, it's like if you're going to do all youth, you need to do all youth, including everybody. It's not just one sided, people that look normal and stuff like that. So I could say I thank you for being involved with everybody in not just having one subjective group, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, it does. I appreciate that. And wow, that opens actually up so many different avenues. So now I know folks at home can't see us, right? Because this is a podcast, but I will say, gosh, I'm not white. I'm Mexican indigenous. And so, gosh, doesn't that open up such a huge thing? I talk about this all the time when I'm talking about intersectionality, is that we can highlight all the multiple overlapping sort of oppressions and marginalizations we have, but we're not calling attention to those privileges as well, then I think we're really doing a disservice. And I think that you just like proved one huge that I tend to talk about, which is, gosh, for someone who is a person of color, I'm so light skinned. And unfortunately, colorism is very real. And in some geographic locations, I pass for white, you know, and that, like you said, is a real privilege, and one that I don't definitely take for granted. So I appreciate you bringing that up for sure. And I will just say too, it reminds me of Youth Move National's vision statement, because I got a little spiel that I do. Can I do my spiel for y'all? It'd be okay if I do my spiel around. Okay. So our vision statement is Youth Move National envisions a future in which young people are valued as empowered leaders, advocates, and designers of communities that are built for all youth to thrive. And so, right, when you said that all, it reminded me of our vision statement because I always emphasize the all, but not for any sort of like nefarious all, meaning like everyone is oppressed and like we all are equal, because we're not. I emphasize all youth to thrive because literally not all youth are thriving. And what's again, who are those folks who are disproportionately not thriving? The folks who have been historically and presently excluded and marginalized, right? So our BIPOC youth, our 2S LGBTQI plus youth, our disabled youth, right, who are disabled by the systems, our carcerated youth, right? So we're really talking about, once again, when we emphasize that all, it's to get to the ultimate goal, right? That ultimate goal is joy, is celebration, is all of us thriving, but we're not there. And again, disproportionately, it's those same folks who are continuously pushed aside, marginalized, and harmed, both in very intentional ways and in unintentional ways, which just like we said we'd go back to like settler colonialism or colonialism, right? That's what we have. You know, I think oftentimes I see folks who say, you know, we really need system reform. Gosh, the system is broken. It's not working like as intended. Oh, we got to do some harm reduction. Isn't it a shame? We can fix this. Y'all, we're under settler colonialism. Like the system is not broken. It is very much so working as intended. You know, at no point did anyone hit pause, say, you know what, we made a huge mistake and committed mass genocide and enslavement of mass people, and we're here to apologize. We're here to give that land back. We're here to give that wealth back. We're here to like get you back to where you were at and try to like reseed the life that was lost, right? No one ever did that. So, you know, fast forward the hundreds of years since sort of like Western imperialism came to the shores of North America, we're still there. Like we're still within those settler colonial systems. And so it's really trying to recognize that when we are talking about system work, although a lot of what Youth Move National does, and I do believe in system reform, is that harm reduction, we also have to be thinking about abolition work. We have to be thinking about liberation work because Okay, I'm going to use a silly example. I like to use silly analogies. It's like we've got a washer and a dryer, right? And we somehow want to turn the washing machine that we have into a dryer. And it's not going to happen because it's not a dryer. We have a washer, right? So we can reform it all we want. We can replace parts. Like we can like turn off where the water comes out. Like we could do all of these modifications to the washing machine. It's never going to be a dryer because it's a washing machine. And so at some point, we're going to have to find something new. We're going to have to switch over. And that's what I love so much about our chapter network and the work that y'all are out there doing, because you're creating community for yourselves, by yourselves. You're thinking of that creative innovation. You're seeking ways around the system itself. And you're really like inventing new ways to be together as one, even interacting with these systems or outside. And I think that that's where the most beautiful creative work is in those liberation spaces, is in those abolition space movements. Yeah. So when I mentioned anti-colonialism, anti-settler colonialism, we really try to approach it with having kind of like we have two pots, and one is very much so in system reform, but another pot is very much outside of that. And that's one of the things that excites me the most about working for Youth Move National, is that we really try to do both as best as you can. So, gosh, I'm just like rambling nonstop. I feel so. Hopefully, this is good. Hopefully, it makes sense.
This is perfect.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. What I will say that I would like to add to, like, previous to what you were saying about how the system works, we just have to like kind of adjust it. Another thing that a lot of people don't realize is that it's the accountability. In
Yeah,
order for us to actually get somewhere, it's that accountability part. And unfortunately, that accountability is not there. And I don't know how many times it's just like, just own up to what's going on, own up, move on.
yeah,
And it's like, I understand it's not y'all's fault. It was a sense of just like, it was our ancestors and blah, blah, blah. But also the same breath, it still continues. And
absolutely.
I would also like to apologize to assume that you were white.
You're
you know,
great. No, you're
and
great.
so but it's just I don't know, it's just accountability. If we could start where they are taking accountability for the actions that have been caused and actually change it, then we'll be able to get these systems in order. We'll be able to have more resources. That's just my thing. I feel like I'm kind of veering off with our subjects, but that's just something I feel like we would be able to adjust if we get that chunk started,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I
And people
appreciate
still
that.
willing to learn. I think that's really lacking.
Yeah. I like I said, so I'm Mexican indigenous. I do a lot of work within Native indigenous communities, especially work within the First Nations up in Canada. And there's this quote that I love and I use all the time, and it comes from Willie Littlechild, who is on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. And Willie just has this amazing quote, which is about reconciliation. So the way that Willie defines it is that reconciliation is about establishing and maintaining a mutually respectful relationship between Indigenous and not Indigenous people in this country. In order for that to happen, there has to be an awareness of the past, an acknowledgement of the harm that has been inflicted, atonement for the causes, and then action to change that behavior, right? So, reconciliation is essentially those 4 points. It's awareness of what happened, an acknowledgement that, yeah, maybe it wasn't literally you, but acknowledge that it was your ancestors, right? An atonement for that, right? Like, come to atone for those and actions to change it. And I feel like, particularly in the United States, we're really far behind doing possibly any of these 4 things. I would have said maybe prior in the early aughts, maybe in the 2000s, that maybe we were at awareness, moving towards acknowledgement. But, you know, when I look at our current political system, when I look at what's happening right now, we're not even at awareness anymore. Like there is an active, orchestrated attempt to get rid of our true, real, accurate history, right? Like we see that throughout all schools across the nation with the rollback of like critical race theory, with the rollback of like you can't say gay, right? That don't say gay bill down in Florida. We are still actively erasing the things that our country has done. And until we can even get to step one, which is awareness, gosh, we are really, really missing the point. And I will say, although not to bring up hope, but I do have hope. Like we're out there, we're doing the work. Like there's hope, there's positivity. We're still living, we're still thriving, we're finding our ways. But I think that that helps me with sort of like the white progress myth. And I don't know if y'all know this, but like, you know, the white progress myth is essentially if white people are doing it, it's getting better over time. You know, like art. Oh, the best art is from white people and it's getting better over time. Science, the best science is from white people and it's getting better over time. Society, oh, the best society is a Western white society and it's getting better over time. And it's like, it is literally not. It is literally not. So I'm queer and trans, and I'm parent of queer and trans folks, which is awesome. Like we shouldn't, either of us shouldn't be alive, our family. So I love that we're like living beyond statistics and being able to thrive in our own little queer and trans family. But we watch what's happening in the legislation all across this nation. And I checked ACLU, I think it was Saturday. It was a couple of days ago, and we were at 510. We're at 510 anti-trans youth bills making its way throughout all of the states and our nation. And those bills are passing. And what was happening was that lower courts were sort of stepping in and being like, let's pause this. You can't really do it. They're not doing that anymore. Like these are now passing and they're being enforced, right? Like I said, I'm Coahutecan is my tribal nation. We're Southern Texas, Northern Mexico. And I know folks in Texas who are actively being investigated by CPS for simply giving life affirming, life saving, gender affirming care to their kids, to their youth. And it's just horrific out there, right? We're legislating eugenics, like biological racism. Eugenics is right back in there, and we're passing these laws. So this, like, again, white progress myth that like, leave it to white people and over time it'll get better. You know, it's really not the case. So yeah, another little bit of a tangent, but just like loving this conversation and where we're going with this, but not necessarily where we're going as a nation. Please jump in.
Honestly, I've said this before. It was kind of like a cracking joke thing, but I was like, if Taylor Swift, because everybody like Taylor Swift, mostly the people, you know,
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about.
I got you.
If we get if we get Taylor Swift to be like, the system's rigged, do the thing, fight the power, it worked. And I was sitting here thinking about it, and they're like, no, that's not going to work. And I'm like, think about it. Who's her demographic? There you have it. If we
Yeah.
get that, and then they start rebelling, everybody else is going to fall in line. And then everybody else, that's like, we've been trying to tell y'all that, but I'll join on the wagon. We'll get something done. You know, that's just my theory on things. But you know,
Let's do it. Let's do it.
right.
You hear us, Taylor? Are you out there?
Right.
Come
You
on.
hear us, Taylor?
Let's do this.
Listen,
We need your Swifties. Like bring them
we
in.
need the Swifties.
Right.
Bring on the Swifties.
If major Hollywood motion pictures are like, we cannot premiere because the Eras Tour movie is coming out, we got to shut it down. Like, come on, you can help us out here a little bit in this country and spread the good word, you know?
Exactly.
Like, we need you. Let's do this. I love that. Yeah, let's make that happen.
Right. No Swifties.
Lizzie, please jump in.
So I agree 1,000,000,000% that if the system was getting better, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. Because clearly, or not the system, well, yeah, the system in general, if things were getting better, we wouldn't still be advocating for the same thing, different changes
Mhm.
or same changes. Like, I get very, 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 very heated when it comes to, I don't know what the correct word is, but like the people that are like against LGBTQ plus it just really irks my nerves, and it just makes me want to run my head into a wall sometimes. And it blows my mind because I feel like I learned something about Colorado because that's where I'm at and where Ray is
Yeah.
and Julia was here. But I guess I just learned the difference between a red state and a blue state and a purple state.
Mm.
And I guess it was like a red state and then or a purple state or something like that. And then our governor, who is awesome, he is gay. So once that happened, everything started changing and you can see things are getting better in Colorado, just not where they're supposed to be. And then us who are sitting here in Colorado learning about all the things that are happening in different states are like, wait, what? Like these people are getting arrested and kids taken away for doing something that is a basic necessity for everyone. People should have people have the right to feel the way they want to feel in their own skin and not have to worry about, oh, am I going to get arrested or is there going to be any type of retaliation?
Murdered.
Yeah, exactly. And it just blows my mind. And I agree with Ray, even though I went to the Taylor Swift movie 3 times in a row each night. I even went to their opening premiere.
Well, Lizzie, we need you. You got to talk to Taylor's people. What are you doing?
She was in
Taylor.
Colorado. She was in Colorado last week. But yeah, I mean, it just sucks. I just feel like I don't know how many times we can say it till we're blue in the face that I don't know where I was going, but I just need to go on a little rant for a second because
I'm loving it.
It's just frustrating. It makes me just want to cry because I have friends who like tell me things and it's like, please, like, and that's my job. Like I'm trying to help make a change.
Yeah.
And then
go ahead.
I'll say this real quick. I was at a conference a couple weeks ago and someone from Kansas, he now works in the Department of Human Service field, but he was a former foster youth and he got kicked out of his foster home because his small town was really, really, really small. And someone found out he was gay and then it went like his caseworker found out and the caseworker told the foster parents and he got kicked out. And it's just like, please don't. Like anyone, please just don't. Like
That's the message. You take anything away, please don't. Can you just don't?
Right. Just don't. How about no?
Yeah.
The thing that's like crazy to me is I know that a lot of people are probably going to be asking, well, how do I help? Don't be a savior. I can say that. Do not be the savior and meaning like, oh, I like to help people. I like to help the LGBT community. I like to help, Black people because, I have Black friends or I have white friends. Don't be that person. And it's just like, you can help without trying to have this, I'm the savior on your forehead or as a badge, You don't need that as a badge of honor. You could volunteer, you could be in support, but don't be the face of whatever it is. I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk about this, but Black Lives Matter. With Colorado Springs specifically, it made me uncomfortable because a lot of the times it was white faces. And it was just like, it's Black Lives Matter. I understand that y'all are trying to be like helpers and stuff like that, but you could be with, but not be the face of it, if that makes sense. That's just my little 2 cents on. Or if like trans people are protesting. If you're straight, don't be the face of the.
For sure.
Like,
why are you taking up space?
Exactly. Why are you taking up space? And that's the thing. Like, your presence is already enough.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that y'all have to be like hush hush, but you could stand there, but stand there in silence.
For sure.
So that's just my little 2 cents. on everything. I know people are probably going to side-eye me during this podcast, but hey, you don't have to be all up in the Kool-Aid and you don't even know the flavor, you know?
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
just like you gotta do things the right way. And I'm not saying there's a right way and a wrong way, but there is,
yeah,
if that makes sense.
yeah. I'm gonna back you up on this. So I got two things to share. So first, I'm gonna share my favorite definition of the word ally. And this comes from Mia Mackenzie. Y'all know Mia Mackenzie. Awesome activist, did a blog for a long time called Black Girl Dangerously, is an author, has some great books, super awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna read this just to make sure I get it right. Mia says, ally, in quotes, so we got some air quotes going on. I know you can't see it at home, but we got some air quotes. Ally cannot be a label that someone stamps onto you, or God forbid that you stamp onto yourself. So you can go around claiming it as some kind of identity. It is not an identity. It's a practice.
Period.
Yep, period. I see it. There is a period. Yeah, it's not an identity, period. It's a practice. It's an active thing that must be done over and over again in the largest and smallest ways every day. It is a verb. It is something you have to do, right? Like, it is not a label. It is not an identity. Like, come on, y'all. So one, want to offer that. And then two, I used to be in higher ed. So I was in higher ed, gosh, almost for a decade. And we used to run events all the time, bring in fancy, cool speakers, do Q&A sessions. It used to be super cool. And all of them were involved in social justice because that was the area in which I worked. So very much so 2S LGBTQI plus social justice, broad social justice, racial social justice. And so we have these awesome, amazing speakers doing awesome, amazing work in the communities that they're representing, talking about those communities that they're representing, right? And then the folks in the audience. So we're going to talk about calling people out. I'm going to do it. Who always had the longest questions that were never a question, never got to the point at all, were the white, cisgender, heterosexual males. And like, to your point, hey, cool, I'm glad you showed up. I want you here because you're the one who needs to hear it. Like, I want you here. You're the one that needs to hear it. And I want you to be an ally. Allies are needed in this work. So I want you to go back to your friends, to your families, and I want you to talk about what you saw here today and spread that knowledge and do that action. But what I don't want you to do, and I saw this so many times, is raise your hand and we go, okay, Zach, or like, okay, Brad, like whatever this sort of like my point is, right? And they get up and for like 20 minutes, it's like, well, I know I have privilege. I'm just like a white, cisgender, heterosexual male. And I know that I have privilege because I am white, y'all. I am white. I'm heterosexual. I love the women. I'm just going to say I love women. And, so I'm white and I come from a white, and like, are we allowed to swear on this? Should I not swear? Maybe? Can I drop an F-bomb?
Try to navigate around it.
Okay. So maybe effing, do you have a question? Do you have a point? Like, you have been saying your identities and taking up space for like 30 minutes and you've just to get to an effing question. Like, sit down. Like, it's really about how much space you take up, and you're going to
Right.
come into this space and take up all of the space. And it's just like, why? That's not being an ally. Sit down, Zach. Gosh, sit
Right.
down.
And I'm going to go a step further with
Let's
that
do it.
because every time when I'm like in a meeting or something like that, and then they have like, our good old OG diversity
Uh-huh.
training for all work, it's always their loaded questions for me that it's just like, babe, you kind of answered the question in your question, air quotes on question, and the thing is that them specifically, it's always, they have this shield of, I'm a straight man, don't like come towards me. And it's like, babe, they're not even looking at you in the first place. They're not even looking at you.
Yeah.
You're not that tight, but that's a whole other topic for a whole other day. But it's also one of those things where it's just like, y'all can be allies, but don't be like awkward about it.
Yeah.
I don't, even with men in general, they are so kind of awkward and back and forth with it. And it's just, you ain't got to like it, but people have rights. And that's
Mhm.
the thing. That's where it's not clicking in their head. That goes with people in general. You ain't got to like whatever it is that people are doing. But at the end of the day, they are still goddamn human,
Yeah.
and you're not going to sit here and act like it's okay to be different. It's 2023, babe. Why
Come
are
on.
we still doing this? This is not
Yeah.
the 1950s. This is not the 1800s. I'm gonna need you to run that back, Turbo. We got different genders, we got different names, we got pronouns, we got everything up under the sun. Yes,
Mhm.
it may make you uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, that is that person. That is how they feel, and this is how they see things. Deal with it. In
Yeah.
the words of that one guy from the movie Hole, that's too damn bad. You keep digging. That's it. It's like I don't know. It's just it people, just for the love of God, have some decency, have some decorum and manners. That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and I think too, like, why do you care? Like, who cares who other people love? Who cares who engages in like consensual, attraction and love and like expression? So I'm trans and I identify as trans and non-binary and two-spirit. And I wear skirt all the time. I love wearing dresses. Like, it's one of my favorite things. And like, why do you care? Like, what am I possibly doing wrong to you that you got to come at me? I just being me. I don't come at you, Zach, for wearing your cargo shorts and your polo. That's not my look, but I ain't coming at you, Brad. You know, come on, let people be. You know, maybe try celebrating the unknown for once instead of pushing it away. Sorry, Lizzie, I see your hand. Please jump in.
I just have to say, well, two things. I love this conversation. This is like, I have to say, by far one of my favorite podcasts that we have filmed, because I feel like it's so like, it's deep, but it's also like, we're just like, I was so like, I don't know what the word is because no one will be able to see my hand motions.
Fire,
Yes.
fire. It's a real
Yeah,
one. It's a
it
real one
is
today.
definitely a real one.
It's
And
definitely an amped up thing.
I
Get
think
all amped
that
up.
one of the things that I feel people struggle with is because I know I've been thinking about this for a little bit because we talked about it, is the fact that when, like, you were talking about being in a conference and it's always the cis white males raising their hand, like saying things or asking, not asking
Yeah,
questions.
for sure.
And I think the issue that I feel like I have, I don't know if this is just my perception, it's not facts.
Yeah.
But I feel like people come into these conferences, learn about it. I personally feel like sometimes they only come because they have to, not because
Mm-hmm.
they actually care.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are those people that come that care and want to learn. I'm not saying there's not, but there's those select few that are there because they have to. And when it goes, because you said something about like, go tell your friends what you learned at the conference and whatnot. It's just going to be like in one ear and out the other. And those are the people that are hurting the system.
Yeah.
And when, I mean, I'm that type, I feel like when I'm at a conference and I'm learning things, it, oh, okay, that's cool. Like, how am I going to incorporate this
Yeah.
into my everyday life instead of it just being a one-time thing?
We are running
Understand.
out of time. I did want to really quickly bring up intersectionality. You mentioned that. What's your experience with that? Or what does that mean to you?
Oh yeah, let's do this. Okay, this is another buzzword that I see all the time that really really frustrates me. So in the social justice spaces I run in, so many folks use this like intersectional this and intersectionality that, and they're using it as like this broad term that basically just means like social justice or applies to whatever they need it to apply to in that space, or it means diversity. Like, that's not what it is. Like, intersectionality is a coined term that means something super specific, right? So Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, right, the goddess, back in the late 80s, so 1988, 89, worked with a social justice collective called the River Combahee Collective. And it was a group of Black women who got together and said, gosh, do you experience oppression from being Black? And everyone was like, yeah, of course, racism is real. Do you also experience oppression from being a woman? Yes, of course. Like, sexism is real. Can you tell sometimes when those two things are happening? Are they happening separate? Can you like tell which one is happening when? And that's where really sort of like intersectionality sort of was birthed and really started to like kind of come out. Because at the core of what intersectionality really is, it's about complexity of experience. It's about complexity of identity, and it's about understanding those nuance that you actually don't need to understand people in order to respect and affirm them, in order to validate them, in order to believe them, right? And so there's a chart that I have that I really, really like that's sort of like a wheel. And there's a line, a horizon line that splits that wheel in half. On the top is a list of whole bunch of privileges, and then the bottom is a list of whole bunch of oppressions or marginalizations. And so usually I use myself for an example, and I go through this chart, right? And I'm like, okay, well, I'm autistic, I'm neurodivergent, I have co-occurring serious mental illness, I'm queer, I'm trans, I'm Mexican indigenous, right? I'm a person of color. So I hold all of those marginalizations. But as we talked about today, which I love it, I'm very light skinned. So I pass as white. That is a privilege. I was able to go to college. That was a privilege. I have stable housing. That is a privilege. Right. And so it's really one recognizing how, as an individual, all of your marginalizations and privileges come together to create a complex and unique experience that is unique to you, right? That no one else will ever fully understand or live because it's you. It's your life, it's your identities, it's your community, it's your lived experience. One, that's beautiful in of itself. And I love that, right? It really centers the fact that like we're the expert on ourselves, no one else, that we should have full consent and self-agency no matter what your age is, right? And so that's like a beautiful concept there. But what I also love is that like dual position of it where it's really saying, great, then you don't actually need to understand other people then either in order for you to respect and affirm them, right? And to validate them and believe them. You know, we got talking about conferences a little bit, right? Oftentimes I feel like those folks who maybe are forced to be there or don't really want to be there and they're asking these questions, I don't know if it's coming from a point of like genuine curiosity or if it's coming from a point of like, I'm here to debate you. Like, I'm here to invalidate you. I'm here to find the cracks in order to wiggle my way in there to disprove you. I want you to prove to me you are who you are. And like, honey, I don't need to prove to you I'm real, I'm exist. Hello, I'm right here. Like, that is enough. I am me. I don't need to validate myself to you. We are all different. We are all unique. We are all complex individuals. And understanding that should allow us to approach the unknown, to approach things that we're not used to, that we don't know about, that maybe we haven't been socialized to with love, with curiosity, with kindness, right? That's what I want to see is the world in which we approach people who are different for whatever reason with love and joy and celebration, because that's what makes people and plants and animals and the planet so awesome is that diversity. But instead, what we do is we dig our sort of like toes in the sand. We're like, nope, it's different than me, so it must be wrong. It must be feared. It must be pushed away. And like, that's really what like really makes me upset sometimes with where I'm sort of starting to see, gosh, this country, the world, like people start to move is to really that point of, oh God, this is another tangent. I know we're running out of time. I'm going to pivot to one more tangent. I promise I'm done. Another thing I hear, and I promise it's related, but we're going to have to go a little bit to get back to where we were. All the time in this work, I hear, gosh, we're so divided in this country. We're so divided. No one gets along. No one can talk to anyone. There's no dialogue. Gosh, we are just so divided. And that's the problem. And you know what? To a certain extent, Sure, that's an issue. I want to have dialogue. I want to have community. I want people to learn and grow and adapt and change 1,000%. But why do I have to do that work? Right? Like, why is it that I, the person who's marginalized, the person who's harmed by you, harmed by your system, why is it I got to show up and do your work for you? Right? Like, I got to answer your questions. I got to walk you through it. I got to baby step you point by point. This is how you said something wrong. This is how it affects people. Why do I got to do that work? You need to go do that work on your own. And quite frankly, especially today's climate, we should be divided. I have no common ground with the neo-Nazi. I am not interested in having a dialogue with someone who centers hate. Now, you want to come at me with genuine curiosity, with genuinely trying to center love and just need some help getting there. God, we will talk all day, all night. I am with you. But if you are not centering love, let's be divided because I have no interest in being connected to you. And so I just like both want to say like it's important to like center that love and that curiosity, but it's also important to recognize the harmful people who don't and to draw healthy boundaries and to require them to do their own work. You know, like that's where you need to be an ally. That's where we need other folks stepping in, friends, family members to be like, Brad, listen, let me break this down for you, right? So the queer person doesn't have to, or the black person doesn't have to, or the queer person doesn't have to, right? Because I'm an ally. I was at the conference. I listened. I didn't take up space, but I can break it down for you. And, you know, if they want to come over and they got some work to do, there may be like a foot on their social justice journey. I'm here for it. But if you are centering hate, if you are making people prove themselves to you, gosh, I'm not interested in that conversation. So that was another long ramble, but that's all to say I see that all being a part of the true power and complexity of intersectionality and like why it's so important that we recognize like what Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw sort of like intended. And gosh, I'm sure that this is like a very like we could talk for hours on that. So this is a very broad based view of that. But I just think it's so powerful. And if we could really center that more and have that centering of love, that understanding of complexity, that understanding of lived experience, right? That I feel like we would be way, way better off. All right. I don't know if I answered your question, but that was at least my tangent.
Thank you. That absolutely, Lizzie, go for it.
Is it okay if I ask a question?
Please.
Okay. So with you working at Youth Move National, and I guess you're the executive director.
Yes, that is true.
I was like, I looked at Move National's page, and I was like, oh, okay. And so you just spoke about lived experience for like a very brief second.
Yeah.
And you also talked about how, and correct me if I'm wrong, but basically the people, the individuals that are, I don't know how to phrase this. So basically, the people that have to do the correction shouldn't be the people who are
harmed by the action.
Yeah, so exactly. Thank you. So I'm trying to think of, I'm thinking of a situation and I'm trying to think of in what would, have you seen this happen where lived experience individuals or youth have to, like, what do you do in the situation when people are like, okay, you have to prove that you've been in the foster care system or prove that you've been homeless? What?
Yeah.
You ain't gonna ask me to prove something. But like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that happens, like, especially in our field of work is like,
Yeah.
oh, prove that you've been in foster care. Okay. So how would you go about that situation instead of us having to fight for ourselves when all we have been doing our whole life is fighting? I don't
Yeah.
know if any of that made sense, but it did in my
Oh,
head.
makes complete sense. Yeah, I'm with you. And oh my gosh, Lizzie, I see that all the time, especially as executive director of Youth Move National, because we're dealing with other nonprofits, we're dealing with for-profits, we're dealing with organizations in general that, you know, are looking to us to be the leaders that we are in the field to help guide them and to help them learn and grow and change and adapt. And a lot of times, what we get is we get folks who say, yeah, but where's the training for the youth, right? Youth need to be trained on like how to appropriately do XYZ. And I'm like, what? Like to Ray's point earlier, actually, y'all adults need the training, right? Like the youth need to teach y'all on how it is because y'all are showing up and doing sort of the same things, like the same harms, if not worse. And y'all should know better, right? So it depends on what the situation is. I have privilege, I have power, I have positionality. All of those things are a privilege point of view. So if I'm talking to someone who is sort of like doing the prove it, or like you gotta like validate it for me, walk me through it. Where's the evidence? Evidence based, right? I hear that all the time. Lived experience is evidence. Like, hello, my story is real. It's true. That is enough. I say that. I just say that like right to their face. And I think having some sort of approach that has common ground but walks them closer is what I've seen really work well in a friendly call in way more than anything else, right? So let's say, again, back to the sort of like conference example. It's at a conference. Someone is like, well, prove to me that you've been houseless. Prove to me that you're valid. I would find that common grounds. So what is the conference, right? Let's say the conference is on houselessness. I would say, well, hey, I really appreciate your question and I appreciate your curiosity, right? You are at a conference around houselessness. So I know you care. Like, I know this matters to you. It matters to me too, and I think together, because it matters to both of us, we can do a lot of difference in this field if we work together. So I want to let you in on something since we have that in common is that, my story is personal to me. It's real because I'm here, because I lived it. And I think centering the people who have that lived experience, who have that identity, or who are from that community, that's really what advocacy work is about, right? It's not about speaking for others. It's really about lowering your own voice in order to amplify those voices who are in need. And so I would say in the future, approaching someone with that sort of like line of thinking can actually do a lot of harm. So I appreciate you asking me that, but I'm not really going to answer that for you because that's personal to me and I don't need to validate myself to you, right? So sort of again find that common ground. Why are you both there? How can you connect? And then really trying to build them up to like, you don't need to do that. A matter of fact, there's a different way to approach this, and I can help you guide over there. Is sort of how I would do it. But these are just I statements. I am not Youth Move National, right? That's the board, that's our staff, that's our chapters, that's y'all. I am not here speaking on behalf of our organization. I'm just using I statements here. I'm speaking on behalf of me. So I think that's what I would do, and that's how I would approach it. And again, why I think allies are needed in the work, right? So if someone's having really voyeuristic or tokenizing problematic, harmful questions about what it's like to be queer or trans or a person of color, that's when we need someone of that privileged identity to stop in to be like, hey, Zach, appreciate these questions. Let me talk to you over here in the corner. I'll help you out. Like, let's maybe like leave the conference and I'll talk to you out in the hall. That's where we need those allies really kind of coming in because that's the work that they can do is like talking to fellow members of their own identity and their own community, softening some of those messages and like really getting folks to the point where maybe now you're a little further down the road on your social justice journey. Now maybe we can engage in some dialogue because you have some of those safety measures in place, right? Because it's really about you're going to do more harm right now is what's going to happen as you like fumble through this sort of question of making us prove ourselves to you when I don't need to. And I'm so sorry for all the Brads and Zachs out there. Like I am picking on y'all today. I am so sorry. Anyone could have the name Brad and Zach. You are great in my book. I'm sorry I'm using that as an example. But Lizzie, I don't know if that helps answer the question or gets to it, but that's what I think of.
It definitely does. I think that it is going to be amazing because I know we have some adult allies that listen to the podcast, I think that it will also be amazing that they have heard that and knowing that like maybe them stepping in instead of us having to step in. And
Exactly.
another thing that that Kippy has spoken to us about is our story is our gift and we're not just going to give it to anyone. And we don't have to just give it to anyone.
Yeah.
It is it is information that no one has a right to have besides ourselves. So, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
I think we might be nearing the end of our episode. Thank you so much for joining us today. Do you have any last little bit of advice or a message to listeners?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I appreciate that. I mean, I'd love to, if we're going to wrap up, maybe just go down that lived experience angle because I feel like it's so important and it's so powerful, both to ourselves, if we keep that, and both in sharing that, you know? And so at Youth Move National, literally 100% of our staff and our board have very lived experience as youth navigating harmful systems. Myself, you know, so I'm Mexican indigenous. I was removed, not by choice, from my culture, from my people, from my ancestors, from my heritage. I grew up in a white adopted family. And that was really hard. Really hard to find my indigenous community and my people and my tribal nation. It took a lot of work, and that was really very, very defining to me, really growing up and what that looked like. And I know, equal laws are really important to talk about too, because gosh, it's so important to have those in place. The forced removal of native children to white families is it's eugenics. It's just further settler colonialism. It's further biological racism. It's just a horrible practice. So I'm actually kind of glad the Supreme Court, for some reason, showed up and really held true to some of those laws because I just know, yeah, that deeply affected me. And I grew up. My adopted father has substance misuse issues, and that was really difficult. And I was physically and emotionally and I guess I should have did a content warning, but, like, sexually abused for the vast part of my life, and it was just really hard to try to navigate getting help within youth serving systems and to find those people who could help me, and I did never figure it out, I ended up houseless for more years still than I've been in stable housing. I lived out of my car for a very long time. We find the ways to survive, and I think when people talk about, sharing our stories, when I share with people a little bit of my story, I get that like, oh, you're so resilient, right? We're gonna go back to that. I get that. Thank you for sharing. That's so powerful. Gosh, what a gift. It really seems like you turn that into like a powerful thing. That's not resilience. That is survival. When we picture this like poster child of what resilience is. It's like this concrete, and there's a little flower growing up between the cracks, right? We're like, oh, it's resilience. It's so beautiful. No, it's not. That is survival. That is not thriving. And I think that that's what was stolen from me was the ability to thrive in anything I wanted. That was taken. I will never get that back. Systemic oppression is real and it affects us. So approaching things from like a deficit model that's sort of like pick yourself up by the bootstraps and just work harder. You can achieve anything. You cannot because systemic oppression is real. And we have to recognize that. And so lived experience is powerful in the sense that Lizzie, like you said, it's our story. It makes us who we are for better or for worse and everything in between. And sharing that can be powerful, but also knowing our own stories, like our own creation stories and keeping that for us and knowing who we are is equally as important, and finding community is so important too. I talk a lot about hierarchy and needs in our line of work, and that was directly stolen from the Blackfoot tribe. So that's tribal knowledge right there. That's indigenous teaching right there. And the top is not self-actualization, the top is community. right? So you find out who you are, you find your story, you make that powerful within you, but then you build community. Like that's the ultimate upper echelon, right? Is to spread those powerful stories, you know? So I just lived experience is so important to everything we do. It's important to me. I think again our stories and I just like, if you're keeping it inside, keep it inside. That's powerful. But if you're sharing it, share it. That's also powerful. There's no right way to do this thing, right? We're all just sort of like clumsily tripping our way through life, and I just think, gosh, as long as you're centering love, we'll do okay. We'll figure it out. So I don't know if that's a good way to wrap up, but that's how I wanted to approach that at least.
I think that is a perfect way to wrap up. Centering love. I like ending there.
Yeah. Awesome.
Me too. I
Absolutely love it.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Tay. We talked about a lot of buzzwords, what it really means to be an ally, systemic self-care, anti-colonialism, and intersectionality and centering love. I think this was such a great conversation, and I can't wait for our listeners to hear. So a few last minute announcements. We are still accepting art submissions until November 16th. Is that right, guys?
I believe so, yeah.
Yep, for Homeless Youth Awareness Month. So send in your art, your photography skills, music, spoken word, visual art, all of it. Thank you.